Then with that energy, I will reign with blood and horror on this earth.
Depart.
Hello again, I'm Marty Braden, and welcome to my channel. If you're a first-time viewer, thanks for taking some of your precious time to check this video out. I hope you'll find its content worth it and want to come back for more content just like it. My purpose for my channel is to do all I can to dispel the accusatory fog that the adversary and his minions of liars and deceivers are spewing out into social media today, all in an effort to destroy your faith in God, and especially in the true story of the coming forth of Jesus Christ's restored gospel in its fullness and his church and kingdom here upon the earth, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he's done so one last time before he returns at his second coming, which I believe is drawing closer and closer every day. The Lord restored his gospel in the fullness through the instrumentality of the prophet Joseph Smith Jr. In fact, I just got back from a 17-day tour of more than 40 church history sites of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, including 6 brand new temples. And it was absolutely incredible. It was not only incredible, it was transformational for me. But I'll get into that in just a minute or two. If you're a regular visitor to my channel and you're already familiar with my videos, you'll probably notice right off the bat that there's something very new and different about my forehead. And you'd be right. Yep, I acquired a scar right here, okay? I did a short video about this event, which I titled, "Oh My, What Happened?" In it, I go into greater detail about what happened. I even showed a few pictures of the open wound, which was pretty graphic. It's something else, I have to tell you. I also included a picture of what it looked like after all the stitches were put in before the bandages were put on. And for those of you who are interested in that sort of thing, you can go and check it out, okay? Those of you who are familiar with my videos, you probably noticed the quality of this video is much higher compared to the quality of the one that I have done recently in all the other earlier videos. The one about my head injury didn't have the sharpness and focus I've been wanting to provide you all the time. I've been having frustration, I should say, with the difficulty of trying to make things look sharper, and with my laptop's camera and an older webcam that I had, I've just not been able to be successful at fixing that. Until now, I finally broke down and got a brand new web camera for recording my videos going forward, and that's so this video I think is looking a lot better than the others that I've done in the past. At least I hope you think so. After our trip, I now have access to more than 1,500 pictures and several short video clips that were taken during this incredibly transformational tour of the church history sites back east. But of course, I'm not going to bore you with a family travelogue type video. That wouldn't be smart or fair to you, because I'm absolutely sure that it would bore you to tears. At least I think it would. That said, I do think some of you may enjoy going to the link I provided down in the description of this video, which is a link to my Google Drive where those pics and video shorts are saved. Okay, go and enjoy them if you like that sort of thing. However, today's topic for this video is titled Before and After. Before I jump into it, I do want to take a moment to mention that while I was getting my forehead stitched up, the kids Kath and I were traveling with as their chaperones, shown here in this group picture. And by the way, if you want to find Kathleen and I've circled it right there. That's where we are in that picture. Okay, they were going to be doing their baptisms for the dead work in the temple that morning, which was going to take about an hour and a half. And then once they were done with that, we're all going to jump right back on the bus and head off to our next church history site. But of course, that didn't happen because of my accident. And so while they were waiting for me to get stitched up at the Carthage Hospital Emergency, which was about 35 to 40 minutes away, they were given the opportunity to go and check out a street of small stores in old downtown Nauvoo, shown here in this picture. Okay? There's the temple, and the little downtown area is just right there by the southeast corner of the temple, shown here in the red circle. Anyway, I finally got back about 40 minutes later, and they had finished their temple work, so they had also finished shopping, and The reason for that is because I opened the door for them to enjoy finding some ice cream and checking out some stores and bringing home some souvenirs for themselves. So hooray for me for making that happen for them, right? Okay, I want to also mention that when Kathleen and I got to the Carthage Hospital, within 10 minutes, the doctor and 4 nurses took charge immediately. The doctor did an incredible job of stitching me up, as you can see here, right there. He's done good. If you haven't already watched it, like I said, I put up a video titled, "Oh My, What Happened?" for those of of you who want to get the full story and see where on the temple grounds it happened and so forth, and see before and after pictures of my forehead when it was cut wide open and how it looked like all stitched up. Now, I warn people in the video so they're not shocked, those who don't want to see it. I will say this, that it's a wonder I wasn't hurt worse. If I had allowed myself to fall to the ground, not grabbing that post, I could have broken a hip. I could have also cracked my skull wide open, hitting that iron post so hard like I did with such great force. I shudder to know what could have happened, but I feel pretty lucky. I think someone was watching out for me, don't you? Anyway, I'm happy I got this scar as a souvenir from my visit to the Nauvoo temple. It makes for a pretty good story, doesn't it? I think so. Anyway, the doctor told us that the stitches needed to come out no more than 5 days from then, or the scarring will be more severe if they stay in there longer than those 5 days. And so because I didn't want to mess up the tour schedule a second time and make those kids wait for me again, Kathleen, a day or two later, came across a lady at one of the sites, history sites, and who had helped her husband do that sort of thing. And so Kathleen took courage and took her instructions, and she took her little fingernail clipper, sterilized it, and her tweezers and sterilized that. And with those in hand, she took out those 13 stitches one at a time, just like a pro. If I remember right, it was around 6 a.m. in the morning on the Sunday, 5 days after the accident happened. I now call her Dr. Braden. And as you can see in this video, it has been healing up really well. And that's because Dr. Braden has been taking really good care of me by putting some salve and medicine stuff and rubbing my scar several times a day. So thank you, sweetheart. You're awesome. Okay, enough said about that. While visiting Nauvoo, as I said, I had intended to bring home some kind of souvenir as a reminder of my visit there. And while I was walking on the temple grounds, I was nudged to look down, and when I did, I want to show you something. This is what I saw when I looked down right by my feet. Okay, so I picked it up. It's just so precious to me to have had a thought nudge come to me out of the blue, reminding me that I wanted a souvenir right as I was walking on the temple grounds there in Nauvoo. I now have two fun souvenirs from Nauvoo. It's a small seed that fell from the large oak tree on the southwest corner of the temple grounds there in Nauvoo. And I saw it while I was walking on the temple grounds. Since then, I've often thought, what if it had been planted so it could have grown to maturity right there on those grounds? It would have grown into a huge oak tree that would have been able to bear the fruit of its acorns itself, right? I also had the thought come to me, Marty, you can use it as a micro lesson of how the church itself started. Like the big oak tree this little acorn seed came from, Joseph Smith's seed of faith was planted by the Lord, and that seed of faith of the Lord's prophet Joseph Smith Jr. has grown into a large and grand spiritual tree that has borne its fruit to more than 17 plus million members in the Lord's kingdom, with branches spreading all across the globe. It's called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And as I thought about this, I remembered that at the time of Joseph Smith's martyrdom there at Carthage jail, back in June of 1844, which is 181 years ago, which, by the way, I walked and stood all throughout that building in every one of its rooms a couple weeks ago. I stood at the door and saw the actual hole made by the bullet that took Hiram's life. I stood at the bed which Elder Willard Richards crawled under in order to save his life from the flying bullets going into that room. I stood at the window where Joseph the prophet stood and then fell through it. And you can see those young men by that window. And as you can see it from this view, it came down, it was 2 stories high. And he landed on the ground after falling 2 stories at this well. He landed right there. His body fell those 2 stories, and they shot some more bullets and took Joseph's life. At the time of Joseph's murder, there were approximately 26,000 members, seeds from his spiritual tree, so to speak, who had joined the church during those years from 1830, the year the church seed was planted, on to 1844, when he was killed by a state-sanctioned mob, which was just 14 years from the church's organization. He accomplished so much in those 14 years. So, I love this little acorn that I was nudged to pick up and keep from my trip. I also love the fact that each ring of the tree it came from can be likened to each year of the growth of the church, each ring bearing record of the events and stories that took place during Joseph Smith's shortened lifetime. It's like a witness tree. I will say this. As I look back at my stumble-bumble mishap experience with my forehead, I am able to say to you with confidence, I didn't let go of the iron rod, right? Anyway, after these 17 days of church history sites touring, I now have access to more than 1,500 pictures and a handful of short video clips that Kathleen, myself, and all of these 33 wonderful youth were able to capture as we visited these sites together. If you have any interest in checking them out, as I know some of you will, like I said, I've put a link down into the description of this video that will take you to a file in my Google Drive, where I have saved most of those pictures and videos for anyone who has an interest in doing that. I have to say with all candor, this tour was grueling for my 71-year-old body, and the pace our tour guide, Aaron, kept was incredible. I turned 71 on Sunday the 27th of July, the day following our return home on Saturday the 26th. But I also have to tell you that it was an incredibly transformational experience for me too. As I said, I'm not going to bore you with a travelogue type video, but I am going to try to integrate a few of the pictures and video shorts that I took during this tour and put them into this video as I discuss the topic for this video. I may have to break the overall video up into parts so that I keep it manageable in the way of the length for each video. If and when you check out the Google Drive link in the description below, you'll be able to see everywhere we went, and you'll notice several of the pictures are quite creative and fun, the majority of them being taken by the youth. That said, I titled today's topic of this video, Before and After. It's based on the question, what happened to my testimony during this tour? In it, I answer the question, considering where my testimony of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its restoration claims was just 2.5 weeks ago, and considering how I felt about all of its unique history and stories at that time, I asked myself, how would I describe my testimony and feelings about the church and its unique history today, right now, just 2.5 weeks after the trip? In other words, what, if anything, changed for me by taking this tour in terms of my testimony as I visited these 40 church history sites in person? There's the key, in person. And if something did change, and if I did learn or discover something new, what was it? Okay, to start with, I want to give you a quick overview of the itinerary of my Church History Sites tour by listing all of the sites I saw, and that's so you have a clear idea of what I actually saw, quote, in person, which should help you understand why I'm going to give you the kind of answer I'm going to be giving you to the question I mentioned, which is the topic of this video, before and after. I think it will help set the table and lay the groundwork for my answer. So here it is. On Thursday morning, the 10th of July, we all met in a parking lot in Salt Lake City where the bus was parked, and you can see it was beautiful. It's a brand new bus, and it was fantastic, and the driver, whose name is Michael, was absolutely awesome. I have to tell you that the interesting thing about this tour was the fact that Kathleen and I didn't know a single person on this tour when we started. Absolutely nobody, not even the tour guide Aaron Tesh. Of course, we had chatted on the phone with Aaron a couple times to get a few emails with itinerary and packing instructions and that kind of thing. And we also jumped on one Zoom call with him in order to know how things were going to go down with us being a chaperone couple for the youth. But that's it. Now, to keep this video from becoming a monstrosity of a travelogue, I'm not going to go into the story of how we became chaperones for this tour on this video or do a picture review of the trip. I mean, it's quite the story. Just know that it was just meant to be. And so I'll just leave it at that. I may do another video where I share that story, but that's for another time. What I'm probably going to do is break up this particular video on this topic of before and after into 3 or 4 parts so that we all can enjoy them with a little shorter video and not have to sit and watch a long, tedious 1.5, 2 hour travelogue video. I'm going to try and keep my videos shorter from now on by breaking them up into parts if necessary. Okay, let me set the table by sharing the start of the tour and how that all started out and the kind of experience that we had on the tour. So let's go ahead and show you something here real quick. I'm going to play this. There's my sweetheart, Kathleen. Here you go, sweetheart. We're loading up. I don't want to make this too much of us. And they're all parked around. Lots of little kids and their family bringing them and dropping them off.
Oh, who was the person?
Turn the camera on me. Meeting up at this parking lot, like I said, was the first time we met Aaron Tesh, our tour guide, and the youth that we were going to chaperone on this tour. Once everybody arrived by car and those who came by plane and shuttled over to the parking lot from the airport, once they all got here, we all loaded up and hit the freeway towards Wyoming. Now, to give you a sense as to what we saw from the bus point of view up inside the bus, I want to show you the kind of terrain we drove through as we went through Wyoming and on our way to travel across the entirety of America to get to where the sites were. So let me bring that in and play that for you. It's so beautiful. Utah and Wyoming's landscape's unique. Here's a map to show our route across America. We left Utah and entered into Wyoming with its unique landscape that we just watched a little short video clip of. It was beautiful. After Wyoming, we entered into Nebraska. It's one of the more interesting states we went through as we traveled across the entirety of America to get to where the church history sites were. I knew Nebraska had cornfields and soybean fields, but I had no idea that it took up its entire state. I'm talking miles and miles of cornfields. My goodness. I'm going to go ahead and play this so you get a sense from what we saw while we were on the bus.
Okay.
As far as I could look to the right, as far as I could look to the left and forward and behind, miles and miles of cornfields. It's incredible. It is beautiful. It's a beautiful green state. Yay, Nebraska corn huckers. But I had no idea there was that much cornfields. After we went through Nebraska with all of its corn and soybean fields, we crossed and went into Missouri. And then we went through Indiana, Ohio, and then we went up through Pennsylvania and into New York and up to Palmyra. We also drove through the northern tip of Virginia, and after visiting New York, we went down to Washington, D.C. to see all those wonderful historic sites. But our actual first church history site stop was at the Liberty Jail. I'm going to show you that, arriving to that. The jail was right amongst the neighborhood of homes and businesses, as you can see here. Once we got there and walked into the visitor center, I stopped videotaping because one of the rules of this church sites is that you don't stream or take videos, but you can take all the pictures that you want. That way these visitor centers can make sure their story is told by the sister missionaries that serve at the single church history site throughout the tour.
Okay, this is the Liberty Jail. Be ready, because as soon as I get off, I'm going.
Here's another little video I'm going to play for you. This is where we came right into the tour visitor center that's built all around the actual Liberty Jail. This picture was taken inside the Liberty Jail visitor center. The two young women shown here are the daughters of our tour guide, Erin Tesh, who accompanied their father on the tour with us. I enjoyed them so much. They were a delight as we traveled together and visiting each site. It was especially fun to watch them listening and watching their father as he recited the history behind each site that we visited during this tour. His grasp of the history of the church and these sacred sites was incredible. There were 40 of them, keep in mind. And what was cool about this first site is that, like I said, the visitor center itself was built on top of and all around the actual jail itself. And so I walked down the stairs that was on the side of the jail to sit right in front of the dungeon, right there, located on the basement level of the jail. There was a long padded bench placed no more than 5 or 6 feet from the actual open face of the jail. And so you can see here how close it was. As you look into the dungeon there at the bottom, you can see there's a rope to climb up. I am sure there was a ladder to lower down into the opening in the floor of the above floor down into the dungeon so that the people could step down into or climb out of the dungeon onto the main floor of the jail where the jailers stayed and the visitors would enter. I must tell you that I could have sat there and reflected for an hour or more on Joseph Smith's plight and the sufferings he endured there and throughout the storied life that he experienced. To share just a little bit of the history with you regarding Joseph and those incarcerated with him in this Liberty Jail, let me share from a source that has a first-hand account and record of it. And I quote, On Friday, the 30th of November, 1838, Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith, Lyman White, Alexander McCrae, Caleb Baldwin, and Sidney Rigdon were incarcerated in the jail at Liberty, Missouri, having been falsely charged with treason of all things, my goodness, against the state of Missouri. They spent 4.5 winter months in what they called the dungeon, without heat, adequate food, beds, or sanitary facilities, end quote. It's my understanding that they were given a tin pail for that so-called sanitary facility. Continuing, Sidney was released before the end. Meanwhile, the saints were being violently driven from the state, suffering murder, rape, plundering, and other crimes under the hands of the mobs. Many trusted early leaders had been excommunicated, including 7 members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Joseph's wife Emma wrote a heart-rending letter to him on the 7th of March, which he received on the 19th of March, along with letters from his brother Don Carlos and William, and from Bishop Edward Partridge. She told of the sufferings of her and the children as they were driven from their home, able to take little besides themselves, and of the sufferings of the others. End quote. I would have you place yourself in Emma's and Joseph's shoes, as if you were there, right there at that time, and in those very circumstances. And I then would have you ask yourself, how strong and solid would your testimony be at that moment in time, if you were them? I sat right in front of that dungeon, and I asked myself that very question. Continuing, the next day Joseph began dictating a letter to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who were at Quincy and scattered abroad, and to Bishop Partridge in particular, which was signed by all 5 prisoners and sent to Emma. She was to keep the original and have copies made for the prophet's parents in the church. Orson Pratt, acting under the direction of Brigham Young, extracted portions of the letter for inclusion in the 1876 edition of the Doctrine and Covenants as section 121, 122, and 123. This edition was accepted as scripture by the church in the Conference of 1880. These sections contain some of the finest and best-loved counsel in all of Scripture on such topics as adversity, unrighteous dominion, and the receipt of revealed knowledge by the saints. Although much less well known, the balance of the letter contains some choice nuggets left for us to mine out for ourselves. The present project is presented to this end. End quote. I invite you to read the letter in full for yourself. It can be found in the History of the Church, Volume 3, pages 289 to 303. I also bring to your attention an article on the church's website that was written by Carol Cornwall Madsen, from which I would like to share a few excerpts with you. And I quote, "During the 17 years of their marriage, Joseph and Emma Smith endured hardships. Joseph traveled extensively for the church and was often obliged to find safety among friends to avoid angry state-sanctioned mobs or numerous legal harassments." End quote. If I'm not mistaken, Joseph Smith, the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, had more than 200 legal cases brought against him. He was charged with approximately 30 criminal actions during his life, and at least that many financial civil suits. Continuing, another source reports that Smith was arrested at least 42 times, can you imagine, including in the states of New York, Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois. While he was away, Joseph and Emma wrote consistently to one another, and though only some of those letters have survived, their content and the context in which they were written tell a powerful story. End quote. I would also say that they tell and reveal a powerful testimony of Joseph himself being the vessel of the Lord, even his prophet, and not a fraudster. Continuing, despite the extraordinary and challenging circumstances Joseph and Emma suffered on behalf of their faith, the deep and abiding love they felt for each other and for their children never failed them. Joseph frequently wrote of his love and affection for Emma and his children. "The thoughts of home, of Emma and Julia, rush upon my mind like a flood, and I could wish for a moment to be with them," Joseph wrote from New York in 1832. In another letter he wrote, "My heart is entwined around yours forever and ever." In 1838, while being held prisoner in Independence, Missouri, he began a letter, quote, "My dear and beloved companion of my bosom in tribulation and affliction." He keenly felt the sacrifice of being absent from his family. He wrote to Emma, "If you want to know how much I want to see you, Examine your feelings, how much you want to see me. I would gladly walk from here to you, barefoot and bareheaded, to see you and think it great pleasure and never count it toil. Think for a moment of this principle. Out of the abundance of the heart floweth the tongue. And then reread Joseph's written words. Continuing again, Joseph was concerned for Emma's welfare. When necessity required him to take a trip to New York in 1832 while Emma was expecting their fourth child, he wrote, I feel as if I wanted to say something to you, to comfort you in your peculiar trial and present affliction. I hope God will give you strength that you may not faint. I pray God to soften the hearts of those around you, to be kind to you, and take the burden off your shoulders as much as possible. About 2 years later, while marching westward to Missouri with Zion's camp, Joseph was gratified to hear from Emma that all was well at home. In response to her letter, he wrote, I sit down in my tent to write a few lines to you, to let you know that you are on my mind and that I am sensible of the duties of a husband and father. The few lines you wrote gave me satisfaction and comfort. End of quote. After Kathleen and I got home from our 17-day tour, just a week later we found ourselves at a campsite called Bott's Campsite near Huntsville, Utah, with 3 of our children, 2 of their spouses, and 8 of our 15 grandchildren. And when Joseph wrote, I sit down in my tent, in his letter to Emma along the trail of Zion's camp, I had to cringe. I only had to sleep in a tent on the ground on a blow-up mattress for just 2 miserable nights, and I was ready to go home. Man, I felt like a wimp as I read about Joseph's hardships and him having to sleep 59 nights during Zion's camp. My goodness, these people are amazing to me for what they had to do, and they endured it well. Continuing, Emma did not always have notice before Joseph was forced to leave home to escape illegal arrests or state-sanctioned mob action. He once said about his life, I was meant to swim in deep waters. Continuing, I cannot tell you my feelings when I found I could not see you before you left, she wrote on one such occasion in 1837. Yet I expect you can realize them. His unexpected flight worried their family as well. The children feel very anxious about you because they don't know where you have gone. Her reliance on God, she often noted, provided her comfort at such times. I verily feel that if I had no more confidence in God than some I could name, I should be in a sad case indeed. But I still believe that if we humble ourselves and are as faithful as we can be, we shall be delivered from every snare that may be laid for and at our feet. Emma's letters deeply touched Joseph. On one occasion he wrote, I hope you will continue to communicate to me by your own hand, for this is a consolation to me, to converse with you in this way in my lonely moments. On another occasion he wrote, I received your letter, which I read over and over again. It was a sweet morsel to me. The separations that caused Joseph and Emma such anxiety for each other's welfare extended to their concern for their children. While in prison in Independence, Joseph wrote, those little children are subjects of my meditation continually. Tell them that Father is yet alive. Later that month he wrote, O God, grant that I may have the privilege of seeing once more my lovely family. To press them to my bosom and kiss their lovely cheeks would fill my heart with unspeakable gratitude. When measles afflicted one of the boarders in her Kirtland, Ohio home, Emma was particularly anxious. Neither of your little boys have ever had them, she wrote Joseph in 1837, and then poignantly added, I wish it could be possible for you to be at home when they are sick. You must remember them, for they all remember you, and I could hardly pacify Julia and Joseph when they found out you were not coming home soon. In 1839, Joseph once again was obliged to learn of his children's welfare by letter. This time Emma had cheerful news for Joseph. She was clearly happy in the company of her children, difficult as their circumstances were, and pleased to report that only 3-year-old Frederick was ailing at that time. Baby Alexander, just a year old, is one of the finest little fellows you ever saw in your life. He is so strong that with the assistance of a chair, he will run all around the room. Her letter only whetted Joseph's desire for more news. Write to me a long letter, he responded, and tell me all you can, and even if old Major, the family dog, is alive yet, and what those little prattlers say that cling around your neck. Joseph often fretted that his children would forget him. I want you to not let those little fellows forget me. Tell them Father loves them with a perfect love, and he is doing all he can to get away from the mob to come to them. He wrote to Emma while he was in Liberty. Joseph also shared with Emma his thoughts on how to raise their children properly. Do teach them all you can that they may have good minds, he counseled her. Be tender and kind to them. Don't be fractious to them, but listen to their wants. Tell them Father says they must be good children and mind their mother. My dear Emma, there is great responsibility resting upon you in preserving yourself in honor and sobriety before them and teaching them right things to form their young and tender minds that they begin in the right paths. Of great concern to Joseph was how Emma felt about his status as a prisoner. Dear Emma, he wrote, do you think that my being cast into prison by the mob renders me less worthy of your friendship? He wanted to make certain his children understood the purpose behind his incarceration. Tell them I am in prison, that their lives might be saved. Emma's 3 visits to Joseph in Liberty Jail and her own horrific flight from Missouri to Quincy, Illinois, intensified her feelings of separation, her patient suffering, her unremitting anxiety, her fears for the future, and her irrepressible love for Joseph found voice in the long letter she wrote when she reached safety in Quincy. No one but God knows the reflections of my mind and the feelings of my heart when I left our house and home on almost all of everything that we possessed, excepting our little children, and took my journey out of the state of Missouri, leaving you shut up in that lonesome prison. But the reflection is more than human nature ought to bear. And if God does not record our sufferings and avenge our wrongs on them that are guilty, I shall be sadly mistaken. Despite how this injustice weighed on her, Emma could still say to Joseph, I shall live and yet am willing to suffer more if it is the will of kind heaven that I should do so for your sake. The suffering that Joseph suffered, including his knowledge of his wife that was lost to the mob at that time, to me, is another layer of Joseph's testimony of his divine calling, for it bears witness that he was a prophet and not a self-serving fraudster and womanizer, as his critics chirp and mock, both at the time of Joseph and still to this very day. As I listened to the 2 sister missionaries speak of this lengthy piece of history in Joseph Smith's life that led up to Liberty Jail and that whole experience, and those who loved and served him as God's anointed, such as those that were at the jail, that they suffered the same mistreatment that he suffered along with Joseph, I found myself asking, what was it that they believed so deeply that they willingly submitted to these depravities? What is there about a human being that they will follow a man like themselves into the depths of pain, suffering, risk of life and limb, even beatings and rape and death for some, for a belief system called the gospel of Jesus Christ as it was revealed to the prophet Joseph Smith by the Lord himself? Well, I am going to stop this part 1 here, and we'll pick things up to answer that question in part 2 of before and after. But until then, I wish you continued success. Goodbye. Love you.